Welcome back to another episode of The Complete Creative, the podcast that helps you lead a more complete creative life. I'm your host, Russell Nolte, and today we're talking to my good friend, Neo Edmund. I've learned so much from Neo over the years. He was the first person to convince me to start doing panels at shows. He's the one who showed me how to pitch things at conventions, and he's introduced me to a ton of amazing people. I'm so excited that he's one of the first guests on the relaunched Complete Creative podcast, and I can't wait for you to hear what he has to say. Before we do, I just want to ask that if you are liking this podcast, to please subscribe and head on over to thecompletecreative.com to see everything else that we have to offer you, including 3 free courses. If you want to learn how to create your business, especially a creative business, I highly recommend our free business building course, which you can get at thecompletecreative.com/FBC. All right. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to the show. Take it away, Neo. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
What am I passionate about these days? Man, that's a tough one because everything's kind of crazy and messed up right now. But I mean, it's really, I spend as much time as I can in my writing. It's become my escapism, to just dig down into a story and get the hell out of this world for a while. So I'm passionate about keeping up my energy to continue writing and be free from the bullshit, I guess. Is that an answer? I don't know.
I think it's a good answer. Like writing is escapism. Reading is escapism, and writing is escapism for me. So that's basically 10 hours a day, like diving into either reading in a world or writing in a world. Sounds like a good way to escape whatever's going on out here.
Yeah, no kidding. Because there's a lot going on out here, but whatever.
Is quite a lot going on out here. So for the people that might not know, I know you've been doing this for quite a while, but can you do a kind of a recap of everything you've done up to this point in your illustrious, nearly 20-year creative career?
Okay, so we'll bypass all the acting stuff, right?
Yeah, sure. You can bypass all the acting stuff.
Yeah, so all that stuff. After I transitioned out of acting, I went to college, got my degree in English, and then I fell into this thing called creative development at this company called Platinum Studios, Scott Mitchell Rosenberg. I didn't even know what development was. I was just interning there for credits, and after a month, they're like, "Hey, you want to work here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds great." And so I spent 2 years as a Hollywood creative development executive, which sounds a lot cooler than it probably is, as far as at least in pay scale. But it really gives you an opportunity to really connect into Hollywood and meet a lot of people and start to understand the landscape. So I was chasing, the screenwriting thing for a while. I got a lot of little random gigs. I ended up writing on like Kaijudo, Clash of the Duel Masters at Hasbro and some other things. Wrote some comics with like Zenescope for a while, started a kids line of comics called Silver Dragon Books, which for people who know who Zenescope is, it's like they did kids comics. Yeah, they actually did. And I ended up writing most of them on that line. And then somewhere along the way, I decided I'm just going to write a novel. And I don't know really what made me decide that, but it was really like I woke up one morning and decided I was going to write a novel, and I had this story that had been around forever, which became my first novel, Tale of Red Riding, Rise of the Alpha Huntress, and has since spawned 2 sequels because people seem to want more. And I've probably done, like you, 200 Comic-Con appearances, out there selling books and meeting people and doing the thing. So I guess that's sort of the super quick synopsized version of 20 years, but yeah.
Well, I love the story of Red Riding Hood because it started way before you actually started to write that book, right?
Yeah. I mean, originally, actually, in college, it was an essay, whatever, it was The Wolf. But then I ended up pitching it to Henson Studios. My friend Joe LaFavi, who was an executive there at the time, took me in, and I pitched it to them, and they loved it. and I actually pitched it as an animated series. And they put it in development for like 2 years, or really 2.5 years of going through that whole Hollywood process of like hopeful, like, oh, we're going to go into pitch to Disney. They love it, but their marketing people aren't sure. And then Cartoon Network loves it, but they're not sure. And then after 2.5 years, just beat up and numb from the process. I mean, I guess that's where the idea of writing a book came from, was really just out of sheer frustration and maybe therapy of 2.5 years of development. Hell, as we like to call it in Hollywood. I'm just going to take everything. It's all mine. It's all reverted back to me, and I'm just going to write a book. So, and I think, professionally, I think it's actually the smartest decision I ever made. So, because it opened up a whole different world of opportunities for me. And I realized that, you can create your own properties. Since I decided to self-publish that one, even though, I had options, I had friends in publishing, but I just, at that point, was like, I have to be able to control one thing, and I think that's what indie publishing gives you the power to, which is, a give and take situation, but it is one thing where you can actually just control it. You can decide how it's going to be done. You can decide when it's going to be published, and nobody can tell you can't. And I think that was the most liberating thing about that whole process after 2.5 years of Hollywood development hell, and really years and years of that with other projects, to be able to just have control, was like kind of amazing and terrifying, like truly terrifying, actually. So
Yeah, because it's sort of the two very opposite things that you're doing. When you're in Hollywood, it's like you're trying to hit a home run. It's like you're taking all of these meetings with the hope that somebody's going to greenlight a $1 million, $2 million show. And, that doesn't happen very often. And in fact, getting something done is almost a miracle. Like whenever something gets through production, I'm like, I don't know how this happened, but like, it's a miracle in like creativity that someone actually like decided to say yes to this thing.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas when you're making your own book or comic, you're making, or anything, you're making like money on like a $20 sale, and it's like such a more direct connection. And while it does, for me, it took that, it did give me, it gives you the power. What it really did is, after years of pitching to stone-faced executives or not really understanding why someone would not buy something or would buy something, it like connected you directly with the people who are like reading or watching or connecting with the material, and like, oh, there is an audience here. Even if I have to like make it one by one, inch by inch, I can do this.
Yeah, for sure. But it is a trade-off, because initially when I had published the first thing, I was getting a lot of actual paid work, in animation and such. And there were people that were like, dude, you're taking a risk. If it's not good, people are going to think you're a sucky writer. And it's like, it was all scary, and there's that little button on Amazon that says publish. I don't know if that's what it still says, but at the time it was literally publish, and you push that button, and within an hour, it's like for sale on Amazon. It's out there, and whether people ever see it or buy it or not, the fact is that it's out there, and that's just, it's really scary in itself. I remember agonizing over that button for like hours, just like everything's set up, everything's ready to go. I just have to push the button, and, and it took a lot of it, took a lot actually for me to do it. So
what did you do to convince yourself to actually push that button? Do you remember?
I do actually. It's pretty funny. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there was this song that Ben Folds did with the Henson Studio people, with the Fraggles from Fraggle Rock. And the song is called Do It Anyways. And they made this awesome video with Ben Folds and the Fraggles. And it had just like dropped like that, I think a week maybe, or maybe it had been around for a while. I don't know, but I saw it, and there's all this like, this whole song about like, do it anyways. Like everything's going to be scary. Everything, you're risking everything. It might suck for a while, but whatever, do it anyway. And I actually watched that video over and over and listened to that song a bunch of times. And actually it inspired me, which is a really funny story. And I have friends who work at Nerdist And I told them that, and they're just like, "What?" Like they're like, because Nerdist, made the video with Henson, and they're like, "Really? Like that's what pushed you over the edge?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So apparently, Ben Folds and the Fraggles.
But it ended up being a good move, right?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was scary because I know what people are gonna think, and then a lot of my, I have, fortunately at the time, and now I have a lot of friends that are in the industry and stuff. So, and I had told everybody I was going to do it that's the one thing. If you're going to indie publish everything, is you need to tell everybody you're going to do it, and you need to tell everybody you're going to do it for a long time, so that it's not just sprung on everybody, like all that pre-marketing stuff. So ended up having a lot of friends who retweeted me out or reposted me and stuff, and that really helped to pick up the momentum. But then at the end of the day, it still had to be something people liked, and people did, and I was surprised, and I didn't know, because people were like, "Oh yeah, I read it, it was good." It's like, but is it? You don't know. So, and the first actually moment, because I started doing the cons, I did Long Beach Con. I have friends in the con. They gave me a table. I was helping them out with a lot of other things, so it was kind of a like, you've helped us out a lot, so we're going to give you a free table to go and sell your books. And that was, of course, in itself the first time out terrifying, because you're like, I'm sitting at a table now selling books. Like, who am I? Like, how do I have the right to do this? To take people's money, for a book. I think it was maybe my fourth or fifth con. It was WonderCon in Anaheim, and a lady had bought the book from me on, I think, the first day, the Friday, and I was at the Gloss booth, the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society booth. I was just taking like half day slots. I took one on Friday and one on Sunday, and the lady had bought the book for me on Friday, and then she came back on Sunday and was like, "I need the second book." And I'm like, "Wait, didn't you just buy it for me?" And she's like, "Yeah, I started reading it last night, and I ended up just reading the whole thing, in one night." And it was just like, oh my God, it was like one of those moments of like, you literally sat up all night reading this thing I wrote, like 80,000 word book. And it was just like, I think it was like a pivotal moment where I'm like, oh, wow, maybe I don't suck, So, because when you're writing and publishing and creating, you're in such a vacuum, you don't know what's outside of your own head. Maybe you have people you trust who can tell you, but ultimately it's when somebody you don't know, stranger completely comes up to you and they're like, "This meant something to me," or you get an email from somebody on the other side of the world. And they're like, "I read your book and it moved me in some way, and made me inspired." It's like, those are the moments where you're like, wow, okay, that's cool,
Yeah, that's sort of the rush of conventions. It's like you get that immediate interaction because, I've been releasing a lot of books this year and I have no idea if people like them or not. Like, because you're standing in front of the Amazon KDP dashboard and it's like, well, these numbers show sales. Like, these are all sales. And I know intellectually, like, these are humans who bought my book, but like, it's very impersonal compared to how I'm used to releasing books on Kickstarter or at shows.
Yeah, I think that's, to me, I mean, because shows, of course, half of doing a con is going out and selling books and making money. But to me, like, that ability to interact with people, you and I have shared booths at a bunch of shows now, and I mean, that experience of, I've seen people come to you, just, they come up to you and they're like, they see your book on the table and they're like, "Oh, I read this. I got this from you last time." And they're like, "What else do you got?" And then they buy something else. And it's like, and I have the same experience. Like, Emerald City was the first show I had my third Red Writing book. And a huge number of my sales were people coming back for book 2 and book 3, people who had bought it from me previously. And that experience of people actually coming back and going, "I want more of what you created." I mean, I think that's the fuel, that makes you like, okay, I'll write another book, I'll do more of this. I don't suck, like.
Well, because I almost feel like that first time that you sell somebody, it's like, oh God, I hope I didn't just trick them into buying this thing. Like, you never know. It's like, oh, it's the first time that you're buying a thing from me. And like, you're buying it mostly on like my enthusiasm and pitch and the little bits you read. But when they come back and they're like, "I want more of this thing," and you're like, okay. Whew.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would have never wrote a second Red book had people not kept coming back, and people were emailing me and going, "When is it coming? When is it coming?" And then even the third book, and now a fourth book that I'm working on, because, like, people actually care enough, and I think, without that, I couldn't do it because writing a book is just, it's such an exhausting emotional experience. And it's just so much overwhelming. There's so much anxiety about it. Am I, is this even making sense? Like, do I suck? It's like all the imposter syndrome stuff, that they talk about, and it's like, and even Neil Gaiman talks about that, which is actually kind of helpful to hear him say it. But, you just don't know. So to me, that is a big piece of doing the comic conventions. And, I think that's something that creators should keep in mind, about doing it, that it's not just about the sales, because sometimes you go out and do a show and, it's like Emerald City, you just left. I sold everything on the table. I could have sold the table, it's like it was on fire. And then you go to another con and it's like, nothing happens, you sell 10 books in a whole day or something and you feel defeated, but you gotta just remind yourself it is really about that interaction of people, their reaction. And they walk up to your table and go, oh, that sounds like something I like. Or they come back and they're like, yeah, I liked that. That's the fuel I think that keeps us going creatively, at least for me.
No, for me too. I mean, like I'm doing more of my book Ichabod Jones, which I thought I would never do, given that the main character has a very definitive end at the end of that fourth issue of Ichabod Jones, but people have just for 10 years, five years, however long it's been. And Katrina, there was like, I didn't want to do more of the Katrina books, but people just keep pushing. And you're like, well, one thing I've learned in my creative career is that it is just as hard to write something nobody cares about as something that everybody cares about. Like that little passion project book that I love was just as hard for me to write as another Katrina or more Ichabod issues or another volume of the Monsters and the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell anthology. It's so I have a hard time making things that are brand new anymore because I don't know if people are going to like it. Whereas I know people are going to like this thing, and making anything, even the worst thing in the whole world, is so brutally hard.
Yeah. I've seen an author or lecture. There's a book out there called Start With Why. I can't remember the author's name. It's Simon something. It's blanking. I'm terrible. So that's it. Yeah. And I mean, that concept of like, start with a why, like, why are you doing this thing you're doing, and so every time I start with like, oh, I'm going to start a new series or something, I keep having to ask myself, like, should I be doing that? Like, is there a reason? Like, people would just like keep coming to me asking for more read books, should I keep writing those because there's an audience and I know people will buy them if I take them out to the show, like Emerald City, I took like way more book 3s than book 2s and 1s, which you never do at a show. So it was a risk, but it was so many people coming back for book 3, so it's like, if I do the same with book 4, like, it's just like, so you really got to ask yourself, if you're going to start a new series, like, should I do that?
Well, this is a really hard thing for me because I have a lot of disparate properties, and I didn't think it was going to be a problem when I was younger because I had 2 or 3 books sitting on my table. It's very easy to try and sell 2 or 3 different books.
Sure.
But now with 15 different properties on my table, it's very hard when they're not interconnected to discuss them in a way that is coherent to anybody or to get traction on anything, even if it's not on a table. Even if it's in your emails or in my social media, being able to say, this is a continuation of this series, or this is living in this universe, or this is more of this, is so much easier than saying, this is a new thing that has nothing else has ever existed in this universe. Because suddenly you're taking time away from marketing the sellable things to take a chance on something that may not sell and to basically build that up from scratch. Because while some people will follow you to a new series, that number is not as high as you would like to believe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's tricky, because I've written other things. I've done comics, and I did those Power Ranger books for Random House, and that's a thing I guess I didn't mention, and that was something that came along, and now I'm doing some other things for them. But it's interesting, I've sort of discovered that, especially at a con, if you have too many different things on the table, you kind of might lose people in it. They don't they don't really know where to focus their attention. And I traveled with a big, I did a lot of shows with this big author booth where they would have like 10 authors in this big 20 by 20 booth. And there'd be so many books on the table. Sometimes people would come up and they would just get lost, you'd almost lose them like in the overwhelming, idea. And then at the same time, it's like, should you be championing the thing that, is being received the best, the thing people love the most? So like, is that where you should be putting all your energy? And that's the question I'm hitting all the time. Like, if somebody hires me to write a thing, it's like, great, that's money. I get hired, I get a book, I get a brand thing, that's all great. But like, I have to just keep asking myself, like, where is the best place to put the energy, because there's like 3 different series I want to write right now, and I just keep going back to like, I'm still working on the next Red book, and the next book after that, and every time I try to go into something else, I'm just like, is this worth it? Or, I have to start over, I have to totally start over because it's something else, and then I have to get people to care about that, and it's a challenge, so.
Yeah, but not only that, it's switching between things. So you're like, how much you care about this thing? Well, why don't you take some of that energy that you care about this thing and put it into this other thing? And then if too many people start liking that new thing, suddenly you have to care about 2 different things, and it splits your attention. And it splits not your attention, but your audience's attention. Even at a show, I think that the show is the best encapsulation of like seeing it in action. But even when I do mailing list things, or like when I'm doing social media promotion, doing more Katrina or Ichabod is just easier because people have a vested interest and they've seen it for 5 years. They say, oh, I know that thing. This new thing may be great, but I have a finite amount of energy, and I'm using my energy directed towards Russell Nolte or Neo into this property or these 2 properties. And man, I just don't have the energy to this new property. And so you're almost like trying to take someone's energy that they've already invested in you and move it somewhere else. And what I have found is suddenly those people aren't as invested in the property that was the better. Now they're invested in this new thing. And you're like, oh, great. Now you're not invested in the thing that I'm definitely doing. You're invested in this one-off book. And so, it's easier to just push them on the same train that you've been pushing them on all along and be like, okay, here's more, until they get bored.
Right. But I mean, one thing, from the creative standpoint of continuing that same series, like, I've done 3 Red books, you've done, a bunch of your books now and one thing I will tell you is that it's so much easier because that world, I know the world, I know the characters, I know their voices, and it comes a hell of a lot faster, for me to just sit down and write those exchanges of dialogue between those characters and, to go into a new place and throw in a new creature, and, so there is that, but also, a lot of people, I've had Alpha Huntress now for 5 years, it seems like a long time, but I can take that to any show still. And, if I take 50 or 60 copies of the first book, I can find 50 or 60 people at any con that haven't read that book, So like a lot of people are like, aren't you afraid? It's like, you just keep taking that same thing out. And it's like, yeah, but there's an infinite number of people out there. I mean, there's so many people,
And there's people who saw you last year who may not have bought it last year, and now they're going to buy it this year.
Or they bought book 1 and they're come back for 2 and 3 or whatever it is. Or, yeah, they didn't buy it before, or, or they have a friend, or it's just somebody completely new. So I think the great thing about the cons is like your books can always be new to somebody, and that's not a thing that you really get in mainstream like publishing unless you're like a Neil Gaiman where every book you wrote is going to be on the shelf, it's like, or, you're some enduring author, but if you're that person who's like in the mid-list, in the level of mid-list, like I think, as far as like the equivalency of like what we do to like traditional publishing, we would be, probably fall into that mid-list author category, which is not a bad place to be, because that means people consistently come back and buy whatever you make. You have a base. So, I mean, in terms of doing shows, like, you can go out there and always be new. Like, you can have a 5-year-old book and still it's new to somebody, So, and even with Amazon, I think that's the same thing. It's like, oh, that book's been around. You're like, well, I'll just republish it. I'll just slap a new cover on it and republish it, and then it's new, to somebody, because there's 1 million, 10 million, 100 million people in Amazon, and you've sold to, 100,000 of them or something. So, yeah, it's just, it's like a constant challenge to try to figure out what the right thing to do is.
So how do you keep going? This is the question that I'm like, really is the focus of this podcast. Not just this podcast, but all of these podcasts, because the older that I get, the easier I thought it would get. I don't know if that was just like naivety or what it was, but like, I really thought that after some sort of critical mass level, like, it would start getting easier. And honestly, like, it feels like it's getting harder every day, as I'm not like the new fresh person. There's now like, oh, Russell is this guy who does this thing, or and trying to both break out of that, find new people, and just keep going has gotten so much harder as I've gone on.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's like, you and I, through the book world, have had the fortunate opportunity, and through the convention world, to meet, some of the authors we even grew up reading. Marv Wolfman is a friend. We hang out with him, we have lunch with him, and even people, R.A. Salvatore, Robin Hobbs, these people, I know them, they're friends, and when I talk to them, I feel like, and a lot of these people are A-list famous, and they're still like, I don't know, man, I don't know, it's like, you ask Marv, how do you keep going? He's like, well, what else am I going to do? And, this is what I do, and a lot of other authors have told me that, like, what else am I going to do? Like, what are the options? To go get a regular job, work in a cubicle, start a cell phone business, like, whatever, it's like, how do you, I would just rather put my time into something that I'm truly passionate about. I mean, life goes by so fast, and you're like, I did 20 some cons last year, and to varying degrees of like great success to crappy cons and everything. And I look back and go, or I could have spent that year working in an office cubicle, getting a steady paycheck, but like, which one's a better life experience? I mean, I think everybody needs to decide that for themselves. But for me, it's just like, there's just no other option, like, giving up and going and just doing the regular thing is like, that's like, to me, that's the defeat, when I have to get to that point where it's just like, I can't do this anymore. Like financially or whatever, I'm just crushed to a point, and it's like, that would be the defeat point to me in my mind. So it's like, I'm always fighting against that, so it's like going out and doing another con, and even if it's a bad con, it's like, I only made it, like, I was there all weekend, I only made a few $100s, and it's like, but what else would I be doing this weekend? It's like, I'd be, taking the weekend off between my regular office job to try to catch up on my life. And, it's like, to me, it's just, what keeps me going is that I give myself no other option.
I mean, that is what they say, right? They say, if you can do something else, do something else. But it's only when you can't do something else that I mean, I have a Verizon dealership. That's one of the many things that I do. And like, oftentimes I'm like, I could just go back there. I mean, it's right there. I mean, I own it. I could just go to it and like invest in it. Then I'm like, man, but that's, if you take your foot off the gas even for a second, it feels like it's all gonna come like crashing down, and it's like, well, it's like the end. I know it's probably not the end if you just like walk away for even a little bit of time, but it feels like every time I've taken my foot off the gas, that like it's 10 times. I slow down 10 times more. Even if I take my foot off the gas a little bit, it feels like I'm slowing down a lot. The only way that I've been able to get any action in this game is to just keep the foot on the gas constantly.
Yep. Yeah. It never, and that's really never going to change, because it's like everybody, even your readers, you finish a book, you get it out there. If they like it, they immediately like, when's the next one coming? You're like, man, you read it in whatever, a weekend or a week or whatever, and it takes me, a lot longer to create it. But I don't know. To me, it's like, are you going to look back at your life, in a year and go, man, I wish I'd sold more cell phones at my dealership, or I wish I'd sold more books, I don't know. Or like, nobody's going to look back and be like, I should have spent more time at the Verizon dealership, except business-minded people. That's fine for them. But for creators, I can't feel that, and I'd rather be struggling through this shit than doing that shit, and for me, that's just how it is, and that doesn't work for everybody, that's not necessarily reality, but I built my life in a way to make that functional. So I'd rather just be dangling by, a thread all the time, going to a con every other weekend and living the life that kind of freaking rad, as exhausting it as it is, like, that's just for me, and everybody has to decide what's for them, but that's me. So
see, this is one of the hard parts, because I do feel like, I'm releasing a lot of books this year, and the books are starting to feel like widgets.
Right.
And, I'm like, well, if I'm just selling widgets, like, what's the point of like selling this kind of widget, which is the hardest kind of widget? Like, it's like some random creative thing when like I could go and sell soup or something. I don't know. Like, probably not, soup is not the thing, but like, do you feel like the commoditization of the thing, and like that it's harder when you're just looking at that Amazon dashboard? Because I've never had that before. Like, I've always made money either at shows or on Kickstarter, and I've never felt like it was a commodity until the minute I put it on Amazon and the other platforms. And the minute that happened, suddenly, like, I don't know if the artistry or the uniqueness of it was like almost like sucked out.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, I mean, there is a certain degree of like, if you're going to do this, writing books and making money, at any level, like, you have to have a sense of like, this is also a business. If you're not thinking of this in terms of this is a business and I am selling a product or, widget, then you're definitely in trouble. So, but to me, it's like, as soon as that book is done and it's out there and it's in the world, to me, then it becomes like a piece of product that I need to sell and move. And I'm passionate about it. And if people like it, I'm even proud of it, and I look at it and think that's this great thing that I made that people like, but to some extent, I do need to separate myself from that, that artistic side of it once it's done, because if not, then it can become brutal. Like, when people come up to you and you tell them, oh, this is what my book's about, and they go, well, that sounds dumb. And people at the shows, people at the shows will say, shit, there's a lot of nice people, but you'll at least once an hour get some jerk, that's going to just spit at you, and you got to be able to like deflect that off, and not take it personally. So, and it's the same with the Amazon sales dashboard, because that's just metrics, there is nothing in there other than just metrics, information, data, and it's if you were like basing like that dashboard, your creative power and your, on what that dashboard says, you would just be loathing, because like, it's so absurd where it's like, there'll be 2 or 3 or 4 days when like, boom, there's all these sales and KDP page reads and it's awesome. And then like, suddenly one day there's nothing, it's like it almost flatlines or something. And then it pops back up, and it's like, it's so schizophrenic. If I attached my creative emotion to that, I would just go crazy. So I have to be able to just look at that and go, okay, data, whatever, dismiss it, because seriously, if I let that, I would just never write,
Well, I do think that's a thing of like, that's one reason why I find so many writers are like schizophrenic and like so it's so hard for them to write, and they're so depressed all the time. Like, cause I never understood it until I started basing a lot of my income on the KDP dashboard. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, if I base my whole self-worth on this dashboard, like life would be pretty abysmal for me, because like I'll go and I'll sell more books in a weekend at a convention than I do all month on like KDP and the other platforms.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just, man, I tell you, if I didn't do shows, if I didn't go out and do cons and actually talk with people and meet people and have that experience of people coming back to me and buying more of my stuff and wanting more books and going, when is book 4 coming? How many are you going to write? Are you going to write like 10 of these? Like, you should just keep writing them. It's like, without that, like, energy, like feedback coming to me, that energy, that goodwill, like, I would just crumble, because like that KDP dashboard is just, it's brutal. You just look at it and just be like, God, I must suck, because there are some months that are incredible and then other months that are complete garbage, and there's no consistency. And I don't know, people talk about all these different, you need to use the right keywords and you need discoverability and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I don't know if that's true or not, because I can see no consistent pattern in what happens on Amazon. It's like, sometimes I spend money on ads and boom, it blows up. Another time I spend money on ads and nothing happens, and it's the same thing. It's like I did the same thing 5 different times and got 5 completely different results, with no way to figure out why, because that data they give you is so useless. It's just numbers. It's final back end numbers. So you can't figure out where that traffic's coming from. You can't figure out what was going on. So it would be maddening to me if that was my only experience. And I definitely would have given up like a long time ago, So as much as I, go to shows, and, you and I, we go to shows and we're like, no matter what, if we drive home together, we're like, we have our grumble fest, but at the same time, we're just like, but it was good too, So,
Well, it's so weird, because like you'll look at a book that like has been sitting there like doing nothing on Amazon, and you're like, oh, I sold like 30 copies of that book this weekend, or 10 whatever it is. It's like, this is like, I don't understand. Like it shows me that I'm not crazy, because sitting behind and looking at that dashboard, just, it drives me nuts. I have to separate myself from it, because otherwise I'm just like, I don't understand. How did this book sell 20 copies in one day and literally nothing for 3 days after that? And then 30 copies on another day. Like, it's so upsetting. And the people that are buying the books also aren't the ones that are necessarily leaving the reviews. Like, I get way more, like, if I based like my life on the reviews that I got from Amazon, it'd be very, very hard for me, because I get so many people at shows coming by and like talking about how much they liked the book and how much they liked the writing and yada 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 other thing, and then you go,
yeah, I've seen it happen for you.
Yeah, and you go to Amazon, like, this book has like 5 reviews. I've got at least 50 people the last time I went out that told me how great this book was.
Yeah, I know. That's, I think we're sort of talking ourselves back to the idea of why we're willing to continue to do shows, no matter how exhausting they are, and they are exhausting. You're in a convention hall for whatever, 8 hours. You have to, if you're like us, we talk to what, 1,000 people a day. I don't even know, every single person that walks by who will like acknowledge us. I mean, like, it's incredibly exhausting, and always leave like feeling like, even if I made good money, I'm like, it's so exhausting. I'm never going to do this again, and it's like, yeah, and I'll be back tomorrow or next weekend, because it is that ability to just be there, and to meet those people. KDP just drives me mad, like last week I had on my Alpha Hunters books, like on the KDP reads, it was crazy. It was like, oh my God, like everybody's reading it this week. It's huge. And then like the weekend hits and it kind of like drops down. And then I look today and there's like 20 pages read. And you're like, seriously, I had like one day last week with, 10,000 pages read. It's like, it's like, and you could look at it like, oh, maybe it's Mondays. And you're like, no, it's not Mondays, because, if you just look at that bar graph, it's the most schizophrenic graph imaginable, It looks like some crazy roller coaster, up and down, up and down, up and down, and nothing I can do can quantify what controls it, you know, and all these websites and all these gurus, you know, they talk about how they can somehow magically know the answers to those questions, but I question them. So,
Well, it's like I went away to Italy for 2 weeks and I came back expecting, and while I was in Italy, KDP wouldn't let me onto their website to do anything. Um, and so like 2 weeks later, I'm like, well, that was just 2 weeks of like literally no sales, right? There could not possibly be a sale. I couldn't even get into my dashboard to do anything. And I come back and I'm like, oh, well, that's better than I did this time last month. Randomly, I don't understand. Like, I didn't do anything new, but I did nothing new, but this was like way better than last month.
yep, I know, man. And I've had, even with the marketing and the ads, you know, like the Amazon ads and all that stuff, it's like there are months where I've done a lot of ads, and then there's months where I've done almost no ads and end up with the same amount at the end of the month. And it's like, you know, it's like, if then another month I'm like, fine, I'll do no ads, and then it's a crappy month, you know, and then another, oh, okay, I'll go back to doing ads, and then it's a crappy month, and then I stop doing ads, and then it's huge, you know. There's like, it's insane. Usually with, you know, any other marketing, like you put in a certain amount of marketing time and energy and money, and you're gonna know what the, like, at least be able to have some gauge of your results, you know. And with KDP, there's just no way, you know. It's completely insane. So.
Yeah, what I found is, so I'm doing these things that I've learned. You know, I like basically studied every book, and I'm like, I'm just gonna do what the most popular thing that I heard was, which was doing a lot of releases quickly, which is something that worked 5 years ago. But like, I'm not convinced that any of that stuff works now. Like, I'm not and can you talk a little bit about the things that you've seen that have changed over the 5 years you've been doing this?
Oh God, when I first did it, well, for one, when I first did it, there was probably what, 1,000 books a month, or a couple of thousand books a month, or 10,000 books a month being released. I don't know. What's it up to now?
Like 8,000 a day or something, 2,000 a day at least.
A day. Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, that was probably what it used to be in a month, you know, when I first started. So there's that. Amazon is flooded with so much stuff. It's like you're literally in like a giant ocean of static, you know, and you're trying to like, hey, pay attention to me, you know. And so, I mean, in the beginning, you know, it was different because you could actually like post on like your Facebook page and your Twitter page and actually, you know, get engagement like just organically, you know, like people follow you and paid attention. And now, you know, those things cycle you out, and if you don't pay them, then nobody ever sees anything you post. So, you know, that whole metrics rule has changed, but it's like, it's just, I don't know what's going on right now, because there's these people who just like, they're manufacturing books based on like, they use, you know, some algorithm and different softwares to figure out what keywords are trending the most this week, and then they, you know, they plow out something, and there's groups of people doing it, and they publish a thing that fits some kind of, it literally is a widget, and then they throw some marketing money into it and probably buy a bunch of reviews from some people in India or whatever, you know, and then, you know, they claim they make a ton of money. I don't know if it's true or not, because they love to post their like little graphic of their like their profit, but they never tell you what they never post a graphic of how much money they spent on marketing. So I don't know what's really going on, because, you know, I've tried all of the things that they've done. I've tried the rocket, do the rocket. You just got to do the rocket. You just got to be discovered. You got to figure out all the best keywords and be super discoverable. And you're like, I don't know how being discoverable makes people want to buy something. You know, just there's books that are, you know, right in the front window, right in the front door of Barnes and Noble that bomb. You know, so it's like those are the most discoverable books in the store, and they don't necessarily sell. So that notion of like, oh, if you're highly discoverable, then people will buy your book, it doesn't make sense. Like, why do people buy something they don't care about just because it's on the front page? You know, it's like, I don't know. So I tend to try to stay out of those online discussions, because those people like to yell. So they get really mad if you question them. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's like when I started in, it was like people who were like, I want to write books and make books. And now you have people that are like, I want to manufacture products to fit a keyword algorithm. Like, how do you compete with that when you actually care about making stuff that matters, that people are actually going to care about, because that stuff people are churning out that way. It's like, it's a dime store pulp or whatever, I don't know. It's frustrating because to hear people literally tell me that they're like churning out stuff based on keyword algorithms, and then there are thousands of people that are publishing that stuff every single day, it's like, how do you compete in that market, and to me, the only thing I can do is go out and sell books at shows. So to keep myself sane, that's really it. That was a big rant there, I know.
Well, I mean, that does take you into a different place, right? Like if you're manufacturing stuff and putting a bunch of money into Amazon, like I know I grew up making comics. Like I made my bones making comics. And when you have comics, like you do shows, like that's the thing. Like you do comics, you do shows, like they're intertwined. And when I started doing novels, like people would look at me so funny when I would do shows. They're like, wait, you're doing a convention? I'm like, yeah. They're like, how? I'm like, I'm doing like 30 this year. And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm like, well, like, I don't know. Like that's just the business model. Like that's how independent people make money in comics. And, and the nice thing about a convention, for all the bad things that are about conventions, and I could go on with this forever, there's a finite amount of space at a convention. It means there are a finite amount of people who can be vendors at a convention, which means that like if you get to be a vendor at a convention, you have basically self-selected to be in that space, but like there's only a certain amount of people who can be there. It's not like Facebook ads or Amazon ads where like literally everybody can be doing them at the same time. It's like if you do San Diego Comic-Con, like the biggest, or maybe New York is a little bit bigger in space, but like there's 1 million square feet in between all of the floors and everything of that convention. Whatever that exhibit or floor is, that's what you get. The people on that floor can sell on that floor, and everybody else is not going to be there. Like no one else can sell except the people that are there. Like you're like, sometimes you might get someone who squats at a table, or like there was a guy who used to do Simpsons sketches, and she would like walk around and like he'd just squat at people's tables and like make money. Like, and then when someone found out, he would like leave. And like that was just his thing, but you're not gonna get 500 more people who just took a course, and like now they're ready to do Facebook ads to jack up the price of ads for like just that week after the course is done.
Yeah, it is true, and definitely I've noticed there used to be a lot more authors at shows. A year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think a lot of people, they don't necessarily. One thing I'll tell you with Amazon people is like, they, some of them are very good at making, they get a good cover done. But I think the majority of people who publish on there use really, really terrible covers, and however they manage to sell books or not. But like if you take out a book to a con and you have like some just crappy looking cover, the print set's all crap, it doesn't look like a professional thing, that people aren't going to buy it. And that's what I saw at the cons with all these authors that were coming out. They're like Amazon people, and they get their books printed and they would look like just terrible indie pieces of garbage, and then they wouldn't sell books, and then they're like, oh, you can't sell books at cons, and I'm just like, well, I sell a ton of books at cons, but I also spend a lot of money on my covers, and get them done and make sure they're eye catching and literally stopping people, so that's that's one thing at cons, is just so much sensory for people. There's so much stuff to see, so many things to see, like especially like even a show like San Diego, it's like it's sensory overload. Your brain explodes with so much. But so if you're going to do shows, you definitely got to get out there and be able to stop people, and have something that gets people's attention. So I've definitely seen those authors fall away, the people who don't make interesting looking books, and maybe they're successful on Amazon, maybe they're not, I don't know. But if you're going to sell at shows, that's for dang sure you got to have some really cool looking stuff, it's good, because you got to compete with, if you're an artist alley, you're going to probably be next to some print jockey, that could happen, that's selling print art, beautiful, spectacular print. And, it's just, it's a challenge, man. It's just constant challenge. All of this is, you got to be adaptable. You got to just figure out how to constantly be adapting yourself, to the changes, and they come faster than you can adapt to them. But, if you just keep trying to do the same thing, you're going to be screwed. So I don't know. I may have gone off on a rambling tangent there, but
no, I mean, for me, it's about how do you stand out from everyone else, like that's the good cover and the good blurb and all that stuff that they talk about in, that all authors talk about. You got to have a good cover, a good blurb, and like when someone does the look inside, they have to like what they see, right? That's like those are like the three big things. But like, that's just really a way to set yourself apart, just like going to conventions or doing even doing Facebook ads is a way to set yourself apart, or whatever it is. Like, there's just so much stuff. Amazon is just, it's so much stuff, man. Like, I remember a time where being in the top 100 meant something of like a category, and like it's just like, it's still like there's just so much stuff. Like, there's so much stuff. Like, how do you get into a person's consciousness so that they can start thinking about you and understand that, like, they already have their authors or their people that they buy from. Even, I know we're talking about authors, but like, whatever, like, they've already got their stuff that they already like, their TV shows they like, their video games they like, whatever. There's a very small amount of people who have like the brain power for new stuff. And I'm not saying that they're smarter than other people. I'm saying like they have carved out a piece of their brain that is like, that is new stuff. I like new stuff. Like, that's what I'm into. And, but most people are stuck in this, like, what they already know. They want what they know because they know that it's going to deliver. If they're going to buy a book, it's going to be a Stephen King book or a Nora Roberts book or whatever book from like your favorite author. And so like you have to stand out in a way that like needles into those people's brains and carves a little piece of yourself out for you. And it doesn't happen in one day, it doesn't happen in 2 days, it doesn't happen in a week or maybe even a month, maybe even a year, but you've got to find ways to keep standing out. And that's personally why I like shows, because like nobody is going to go to 50 shows a year.
That's a lot of shows.
Maybe not 50. That's a lot now. No one can go to 30 shows a year. I can. You can. And so like it takes a certain amount of stamina and a certain amount of human to like be able to keep showing up and popping up at show after show after show. And there is a uniqueness to that almost nobody can replicate.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, you've been doing shows for what, 4 years now or something? Yeah, in that range. And I mean, but you could think back, and I've been doing it for going on 5, actually more, because I was doing the comics stuff too. But I mean, you can definitely look at the landscape and see like there were people that were there, 5 years ago or 2 years ago or a year ago that have all fallen away. They gave up. And then there's the people who were just consistently showing up and consistently trying. And you can almost tell like who those people are going to be. You look at somebody and you're like, yeah, you're not going to be here in a year.
Sometimes people do surprise you, but usually, yes, you can. But I was always struck. I'm still struck now that people will much more easily buy from you the second time they see you, because you're like, oh, especially at the same show, like, oh, you're not going anywhere. Oh, it's 3 years. Okay, I've had people come up and just say, I don't really buy anything from somebody like the first year or the first time I see them at a show, because like I have no idea if they're going to be back or like if I should even care. But like after 3 years or after several months of running ads or whatever that thing you do to set yourself apart, suddenly people like there's a trigger that are like, all right, fine, I get it. Now we'll do it.
Well, I mean, I think maybe there's a sense of like validation in that you're like actually something real and not just some, fly by night. That's why people like to go to, the stores that they go to, because they've been there and they know what's there, and I think to the same extent, I mean, if you're walking by an author, you're just somebody walking around a con floor and you see somebody and you see a book, you don't know, man. You're like, You're like, am I going to risk 15 or $20 or whatever it is, on this person that I don't know? I don't know anything about them. It's a risk. And if you're at a con and you're just walking around, you have a finite amount of money you can spend. Most people, you're like, I got $50 to spend at this con or $100 or something. And they're going to be selective about the things they spend. So if you're just somebody just sitting there they've never seen before, it's like they're literally rolling the dice, like maybe I'm going to buy a thing that I'm going to like, and maybe I'm going to buy something that's, crap. I don't know.
It's probably going to be somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. But the point is, like, if they see you, if people start to see you, they know you're around. It's like, you're not just some hack that just showed up one time or something, and so there becomes that sense of like, oh, maybe you are somebody real, like, and you're not just some dude just trying to swindle me out of my $20 or something or whatever it is, So I think there is something to be said about that. But then at the same time, there's also something to be said about not doing the same show infinitely, So like showing up at the same show every year after year after year after year, then in that case, you might start to be perceived as stale, unless, of course, you're coming with new stuff. Because I do see people coming out to shows, bringing the same exact stuff year after year, and it's like, dude, what are you doing? It's like then it's like you're almost like becoming too familiar.
Yeah, I mean, I had that where like 6 weeks I'd see the same people and I'd be like, all right, I need to stop doing all of these same shows because like I literally talked to you for 6 weeks.
Right. And it's then it starts to become the same landscape. So you definitely need to span out there and do different things or skip a year sometimes, especially if you don't have anything new. And, change up your booth, change up your signs, it's like, make yourself not look too static. But man, it's tough, it's a tough thing we do, and people, we all have to decide for ourselves, are we going to do this thing? Are we going to go out there and take this chance and try to do this creative career, or are we just not? Because if you can really doubt yourself, if you think maybe I can't do this, maybe that's not for me, or, that just sounds too exhausting or something, then you probably shouldn't do it. I think the people who successfully do it are the ones that are kind of just too, you're just too starry-eyed or just too dumb to know that you shouldn't,
Or stubborn. Let's say stubborn.
Yeah, let's go with stubborn. That's a better word, I guess, but you got to know that you're gonna be in this for the long haul. It's like, yeah, I have Hollywood people circling around my books, and that's great. That's all great, and you do too. I know, and but it's like you never know if those things are gonna trigger. Like things could be in development forever, so it's like you can't hinge yourself on that idea. So you just got to decide, like, what am I gonna do with my life? What am I gonna do with my time? And when I look back, at a year from now or 5 years from now, am I gonna feel like I did something that was good and, worth my time, or am I going to look back and go, God, what the hell was I thinking? Like I could have been doing anything better. But if you can honestly perceive that, you'll look back in a year or 2 or 5 from now and think, I could have done something better with that time, then you probably should go do that. So
I think that is a good place to end it. We've been talking for a little over an hour. I'll ask you the question I used to ask to end every podcast, which is basically most of the people that are listening here, or writers or artists especially, who are kind of zoned out, doing their own thing. So now I'm going to ask them to pay attention for 5 minutes and give us your best piece of advice that you've learned over the course of your career to build a successful creative career.
Best piece of advice. That's a tough one, man. Like, I think we've been talking about it for the last hour, but in sort of a lot of roundabout ways. But you got to get yourself out there, and you got to be your brand. The thing you do you have to like almost become like, when you're at a con, especially, you got to become like a persona of yourself. You're almost like a character. Like there's the you at your house being the creator and sitting behind your desk and typing or drawing or whatever. But like when you're at the show, you got to be who the persona, that. that image. There's like Neo Edmund, the guy, and then there's Neo Edmund, the con guy, and like you got to build up that brand, and you got to do it in your social media too. People got to like be interested in you and not just the things you sell. Like if they're going to buy your stuff, if they're going to follow you, if they're going to like go through this journey with you, you got to give them things to grab onto, and you got to get people like rooting for you. They're like sitting in the bleachers, on Facebook going, yeah, go dude, go, keep going. I'm living vicariously through your experiences. A lot of people tell me that, like, I can't go out and do this, but I'm watching you do it. And I love seeing that, so it's like, you got to become a thing, you got to become bigger than just a person, I think that's, with any celebrity thing, maybe that's a thing I learned in acting or something, and so you got to be really careful about what you put out there as far as like what you're putting on your social media wall. If you're going to post a lot of politics and stuff, then that's how people are going to perceive you. You have to think like, if a stranger comes to your like Facebook page right now and they scroll through it for like a couple minutes, like what are they going to see? Who are you? And what are you putting out there? And it's the same when somebody comes up to your table at a show and they see you, or when they see you walking around the convention floor and they meet you, what are they seeing? What kind of person are they seeing? Is that somebody they want to follow? Is that somebody they want to be interested in and cheer for? Or is that somebody they want to go, wow, that guy's a dick, and I don't want anything to do with them. So I think you got to become your brand, and you got to become known for the thing you do. So like people know me as, Neo Edmund, the Power Ranger guy. That's one aspect of it because I have a tie into that. But then like people think of me as like Neo Edmund, that Red Riding Book guy, like people post Red Riding images on my Facebook wall all the time because that's a thing they know me for, and that's huge value. It's almost like you are part of your product as much as your book is part of you, so those things become interconnected. And if you're going to do this, you've got to become your brand. That's, I think, the one thing that I've learned.
So that was my good friend, Neo Edmund. I've learned a ton from him over the years, and I hope you did too. If you did, make sure to find him on Twitter or Facebook and let him know. And if you're liking this show, then please subscribe and head on over to thecompletecreative.com to take advantage of our free courses, our daily blog, and everything else that we do to help you lead a better, more complete creative life. Until next time.